Hey, it's Doug with Backcountry Pilgrim. Today I'm looking at a couple of tents and trying to decide which one I am going to be adding to my gear collection. As of now, I have whittled my various tents down to 3 favorites for backpacking. I've got a 3-person, which I use when I am going with my kids because it is big enough for 2 people, and a 2-person sleeping pad with some additional wiggle room for gear or just moving around. That is the MSR 3-person Freelite. My standard luxury 2-person tent is the Big Agnes Copper Spur. Now, this is not the lightest weight of all tents. In fact, the Copper Spur in a 2-person weighs more than my MSR Freelite in a 3-person version, but the Big Agnes is a little tougher, and it's got some pretty nice luxury features for when I'm backpacking, but don't feel like I really need to go ultra light. I also have a 1-person tent in Dyneema. This is my ultralight tent. When the only thing I care about is weight, I go for the X-Mid Pro 1 tent by Durston Gear. Now, I don't have a problem with any of these tents, but there is a little bit of a niche left in my arsenal that I wanted to deal with. This became especially noticeable to me when I started planning out the next segment of my Tahoe Yosemite Trail trip. I'll spare you the details here. You can watch the trip video if you're interested when it comes out, but suffice to say that this is a pretty hairy section of the trail. So to mitigate some of my fears of tackling this route, I decided I was going to go as ultra light as I possibly could, because a lot of this trail is going to involve very high levels of physical exertion, and I thought, well, the less I have to carry, the better in a situation like that. The obvious choice then would be the Durston Gear X-Mid Pro 1. The only problem is I'm going to be hiking through basically a big granite canyon, and with the fallen trees and the water situation and everything else, and I just didn't want the extra stress of a trekking pole tent. A trekking pole structure is completely dependent on the tension that you get between the trekking poles underneath the tent material holding it up and the corners being held down, usually by tent stakes. The problem with that is that in the area I'm going to be in, there's a good chance that I'm either going to be on hard granite slab or in an area of decomposed granite. In the former, you can't get a tent peg into the ground, and in the latter, it's very hard to keep it in the ground. Now, I know about small rock, big rock, and I know there are tie-outs you can do to try to set yourself up, but again, I just didn't want the extra added stress. Now, the obvious choice would be to go for a freestanding tent. That's one that doesn't really require any stakes at all. The problem is those tents can be fairly heavy, and I wanted something in the ultralight range that still had at least most of the capabilities of a freestanding tent, and that meant a semi-freestanding tent. A semi-freestanding tent is basically structured by a tent pole the way a freestanding tent is, but there are usually a couple of corners that have to be guyed or staked out in order for the tent to be perfectly set up. Worst case scenario, you end up with a partially collapsed freestanding tent. It'll do in a pinch. Now, right off the bat, I knew that the Big Agnes Tiger Wall was going to be a main contender. I'd been hearing about this tent for years. I have a couple different buddies that bought them, and it consistently rates as one of the top tents, even outside of the semi-freestanding category. Further, like I said, my 2-person freestanding tent is a Big Agnes, and I love it. So I was basically already a fan of the Big Agnes Tiger Wall before I ever even really seriously considered getting one. But just to be sure there wasn't something that I was unaware of in this category, a quick comparison on PackWizard revealed a pretty serious contender to the Big Agnes Tiger Wall, and that is the Nemo Hornet in their new Osmo fabric. Now, like I said, I'm a fan of Big Agnes, but I am also a fan of Nemo. In fact, Nemo makes my entire standard sleep system loadout. Now, it just so happened that I found the Nemo Hornet in Osmo fabric on sale, so I went ahead and got it, and then I borrowed my buddy Dominion's Big Agnes Tiger Wall. I'm going to take them both out into the woods, set them up, have a look at the features, have a look at the fit, have a look at the takedown, and I'm going to make my decision. The setup on these tents was fairly similar, at least at the macro level. Both of these tent pitches were first-time pitches. I read no instructions, watched no videos to begin with, I just went for it, and I had zero issues with either tent. So as far as setup goes, neither one presented any real problems. You start by laying out the tent body, you stake out the front corners, at least. You snap together the single pole structure, insert it into the two back corners and the front, clip on the tent, overlay and attach the rain fly, and you are done. For a standard pitch of the Tiger Wall, you're going to want 4 stakes, one at each corner. You have a grommet strap in the front for the center pole, and simple lines of cordage on the back and front corners. One thing I noticed right away is that there are no adjustments on these cords. So wherever you decide to pitch this tent, you're going to have to be sure that the stakes are able to be set up right exactly where the cords end. There is a single Y-shaped pole with an attached crossbar to space out the top and color-coded tips which make it easier to figure out which way the pole goes. The tent attaches to the poles using standard U-shaped clips. There are 7 of these to set the tent up, plus 2 snap ball and sockets for the crossbeam. The rainfly has cords to attach to the stakes in the front corners, with adjustable color-coded pinch clips in the front center and rear corners. Assuming you want the vestibules to work, you will need 2 more stakes, and there is 1 extra guy line for the front should you decide that you need it. The vestibules close with a zipper, covered by a strip of material that seals down with a few Velcro dots. There is a door toggle to hold the vestibule door open if you would like, however I found it to be too low to work very well. The fly itself has 2 more guy lines in the rear corners, and 1 additional cord, also requiring a stake, in the rear center. This one can help with ventilation, and that's important because the Tiger Wall has no vents. Only the dual zipper rainfly, which you can zip from the top or the bottom in order to increase airflow. So to really set the tent up, you're going to need as many as 9 stakes. The stakes that come with the Tiger Wall weigh 11 grams each. One thing to note about the Tiger Wall is that it is made of PU-coated nylon, which is going to absorb moisture, causing sag and extra weight if it gets wet. The Tiger Wall's bathtub floor is seam sealed, and its corners are held up by a stiff bit of material, but no internal struts. The doors open with 2 distinct zippers, which I find a bit awkward. I don't like the fact that I always have to make 2 moves if I want to get the door open, but it does allow for a bit of creativity if you want to open only one part of the door for some reason. I did notice that the Tiger Wall had larger doors and more vertical walls, and so it felt like it had more volume on the inside. Note that there is also no adjustments to the rainfly setup, so again, once you decide where the Tiger Wall is going to go, you're just going to have to hope it works. As far as my experience inside the Tiger Wall, one of the things I noticed right away is that it is very yellow. This tent is fairly opaque, but if you don't like this color, you are not going to have a lot of fun in the Tiger Wall because you are basically living in a yellow haze. This makes it nice and bright inside if that's what you need. However, that color can be pretty overwhelming. One thing I liked about the Tiger Wall was the pocket array. There are 3 rear pockets, one of them with headphone routing so you can put a phone or something in it and have 2 different people listening to 2 different sets of wired headphones. There is a large top pocket gear loft and 2 door pockets. It seems like much of the Tiger Wall's interior is taken up by pockets, so if you like that kind of storage, you're not going to have a problem with this tent. There is an additional wide pocket on the rear wall. If that's not enough, you also have tie-outs going across the ceiling. Although I did not really like the toggle on the vestibule from the rainfly, the big Agnes doorkeeper toggles are quite nice. I measured the length of the tent at 84 inches. My feet didn't touch the tent, which is nice for those dewy mornings, but my measurements of the floor were 48 to 39 in a taper, and the tent is 39 at the peak height. This gave me plenty of wiggle room to move around without my head touching the ceiling or the walls. With this tapered width, you are able to get two 20-inch sleeping pads inside the tent. However, you are not going to be able to get two 25s or even one 25 and a 20. Moving over to the Nemo, one of the first things I noticed was the interesting stuff sack that it had. While the Tiger Wall just comes with a large, normal cinch stuff sack, the Nemo's is designed to be able to make it easy to split up in case you are hiking with a partner and want to share the tent loadout. Like the Tiger Wall, the best setup is to stake all four corners. Like the Tiger Wall, the two front cords do not have adjustments, and the center stake is just a grommet strap for the center pole. In the rear are two straps and grommets for the poles, with an interesting curved fastener that snaps right off with a simple twist. The single Y pole snaps in using a ball and socket type setup. The pole is also color coded to make it easier to set up. U-clips attach the tent to the pole. However, on the Nemo there are only 3 instead of 7. And interestingly, the small crossbar is actually attached to the tent instead of the pole, and it snaps right on with dual attachments to the tent. The crossbar is very easy to put on and doesn't require any special rainfly pockets or ball and socket snap-ins. The rainfly's front corners are adjustable so that you can fit it better to the stakes. There is no center attachment. The vestibules also have adjustable cords going out to the stakes, and it attaches with little barrel snaps that snap in and twist off to the tent in a way that I have not seen before, but that I found very easy to use. There is a rear center guy line tie-out, but no cord comes with it. The rainfly vestibules have an overlaying piece of material to cover the zipper, also attached with Velcro dots, and there are vestibule guy lines to the tent should you need them. The toggle for the vestibule doors is one of the best I have ever seen. It is actually so easy to use that you can do it one-handed. Getting inside the tent, one of the first things I noticed was the white and gray mesh material that makes the light much more natural inside the tent and makes for excellent stargazing. The door zipper was excellent, and as far as measurements of the interior, my feet also did not touch the tent while lying down. I measured it 48 to 41 in width as a taper and 83 inches in length. There are no door pockets, although there are large pockets in the rear, one of them set up for a dispersed nightlight and the other set up to view a phone. Unfortunately, this pocket does not have any headphone routing. The Nemo Hornet also does not have any exterior vents, so you are reliant on guy outs and zippers to create airflow if you need it. Having only 3 clips not only makes the Nemo Hornet easier to set up, but easier to take down. Not only are there fewer clips, but because of the way they disattach, you can practically take the entire tent down one-handed. The Nemo pole collapses very small, more like the size of a bike packing tent than a standard backpacking tent. This is also one of the reasons that it is easier to share out this 2-person tent than a standard one. You can actually get this entire tent inside of your backpack horizontally instead of having to set the poles vertically or on the outside. I prefer the U-shaped or V stakes that you see with DAC, for example, and that is what comes with the Tiger Wall tent. The Nemo Hornet comes with a pretty typical Y stake with one grooved side to help hold on to the cordage. I would have rather seen this on all 3 sides, but at least it's there. Further, the Nemo Hornet has blue cords that attach to the stakes that come with it, whereas the Tiger Wall sends the stakes with no cords attached. The Hornet's bathtub floor is quite tall, it is held up by struts, and it is seam sealed. And I also really like the fact that you have adjustable rainfly attachments all the way around. The rainfly zip also has a bigger flap over it, so it is much harder for the zipper to get caught in it. You don't really need a guy out on the back of the Hornet's rainfly because it is very high up and doesn't really need to be pulled out. The catenary cut on the rainfly reduces weight and increases airflow. Now, as far as the features and specs, these 2 tents are fairly similar, definitely enough to be each brand's competition. When you get to this level, gear tends to be pretty similar because there's only so much you can vary without losing your competitive edge in one way or another. and these two tents are no exception. Let's talk about the stats. The Big Agnes Tiger Wall retails for $450 versus the Nemo Hornet, which is $430. The Tiger Wall weighs 37 ounces, the Hornet 35. So you've got a price difference of nearly 5% and a weight difference of nearly 6%. Now each of these tents are two-person, semi-freestanding, double wall, double door, double vestibule tents with single DAC aluminum poles and require 4 to 6 stakes to set up properly. Now as far as the measurements, both tents come in at a 39-inch height. The width of the Tiger Wall as advertised is from 52 tapering down to 42, and the Hornet is 51 tapering to 43. I'll give the win to the Tiger Wall there. The length of the Tiger Wall is 86, the Hornet is 85, so once again we see that the Tiger Wall itself is actually a little bigger. Interestingly, my measurements said that the Tiger Wall was 48 to 39, and the Hornet was 48 to 41. I measured the length of the Tiger Wall at 84 and the Hornet at 83. However, again, keep in mind this was my first pitch of both tents. I think that if I had used every guy out and stake possibility available to me, I might have been able to achieve the manufacturer's stated specs. The Tiger Wall definitely feels quite a bit bigger on the inside. Not only is it objectively bigger in its measurements, but that extra long crossbar increases the volume of the space inside in a way that is very noticeable over the Nemo Hornet, which feels more triangular inside. This means that in the Tiger Wall, one person can move around quite a bit more without touching their head on the tent, and two people have a little better chance of feeling less claustrophobic. I would say personally, the Nemo Hornet is not going to cut it if I actually had two people in there and I wasn't just trying to go super ultra light. Now, according to the manufacturer's specs, there is only half a foot of interior square feet difference between the Hornet and the Tiger Wall, but the Tiger Wall is bigger by about 2%. The vestibule square feet comes in at 8 on the Big Agnes Tiger Wall and 7 on the Nemo Hornet, a difference of 14%. The Tiger Wall also has twice as many pockets. The Osmo fabric is a big seller for the Nemo Hornet. Its blend of polyester and nylon makes for material that is going to shed water and not absorb it. It's also going to not stretch as much when it is wet. Its floor is 1500 millimeter Osmo and 15 denier nylon for the inner. The Tiger Wall is a 1200 millimeter nylon floor and an unreported denier nylon polyester mix for the inner. So for me, the Nemo Hornet was the better choice, but admittedly not by much. I don't know if I've ever seen two pieces of gear that were so similar yet with so many small differences. And it's those small differences that really are going to affect the choice. In the end, this is not a video claiming one tent to be the winner over the other. I'm not saying this one is the best versus that one. Honestly, there are so many small differences, it's really just going to come down to which ones you care about most. For me, the Hornet's lower price and lower weight won out over the Big Agnes Tiger Wall's admittedly nicer size. However, if you are claustrophobic or if you actually plan on using one of these two-person tents for two people, you might want to consider the Tiger Wall instead. I also really like the Nemo setup. I know that when I am really tired, I don't want a lot of fuss setting up my tent, and so I really appreciated the faster setup of the Nemo Hornet. Now, the Tiger Wall's pocket setup is impressive. I think the Tiger Wall could even be a bit of overkill, but it definitely wouldn't be if you wanted to have two people in the tent. Again, the Nemo Hornet is set up very well for one person. It's a pretty spacious one-person tent. However, for two people, you're gonna have to get creative. Further, the Nemo Hornet's material just seems to be objectively superior. The more nylon you have in a tent, the more stretch you're going to get in the material, which is going to affect your structure, and the more it is going to absorb and take on water if it gets wet. The Nemo Osmo is a recycled polyester mix, which is going to keep the water off and it's going to eliminate the kind of stretch that you get with nylon. Subjectively, I also found the yellow of the tiger wall somewhat annoying. Looking out, everything turns yellow. Looking inside, everything is yellow. It's just kind of a weird color for a tent, and I don't like that I don't have any choice in the matter. The more neutral grays and whites of the Hornet made looking outside much more pleasant, stargazing more pleasant, and it looked better even from the outside. Now, two minor things that I normally wouldn't really care about because I'd probably just replace them anyway would be the included stakes and the stuff sack. I love the way they have designed the main bag as a dry bag instead of just a cinch cord, and also the fact that it's set up to be packed half and half so that you can share out the gear with someone else if you'd like. I also really like the fold-over stake bag better than the typical drawstring or tie-off. And finally, the stakes themselves. While I actually prefer the U-shaped stakes that the Tiger Wall gives you, the fact that they don't come corded is kind of annoying. Now, it's something you could do it yourself in probably 5 minutes, but the fact that I'm going to have to go find my cordage, tie the knots off myself, is a little annoying. I would much rather that they just do it themselves. I can always cut the cords off if I don't want them a lot faster than I can tie them on if I do. I also thought that the weird little notch on the stakes was interesting. If that becomes critical to your pitch, you're going to have to pay attention to which direction you put the stakes in. Otherwise, you're going to miss that notch and the cord could pop off. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on the new Nemo Hornet versus the big Agnes Tiger Wall. Both of them check most of my major boxes for the kind of tent I was looking for. It really came down to numerous smaller factors that maybe don't affect the tent objectively so much, but do affect my experience of it. Hope you've enjoyed the video and that it's been informative. If it has, hey, give the video a like if you would, and subscribe to Backcountry Pilgrim if you're into hiking, camping, backpacking, and the gear that goes with it. Until next time, I'm Doug. Thanks for watching.